Dars Zorbek, Jackal Alphys of the Blackwater Gloomers, peered through the scope of her sniper rifle. She focused on the heavily armoured figures that carefully strode towards the nearby comms outpost. Astartes. The cult had always known that it was only a matter of time before someone was sent to investigate, but they had expected Planetary Defence Force, or perhaps, if available, some Imperial Guard. Both could easily have been persuaded to see the hope that the Star Children offered, but Astartes? No, their faith in the Imperium and that which led it was too strong to allow them to embrace the warmth of the Four-Armed Emperor. These interlopers would have to be dealt with, lest they impede the plans long put in place. Dars signalled to her patrol convoy. There was still time to lay a trap. She allowed herself a smile. There was always time to lay a trap. Cato Paladris, Primaris Lieutenant on the Stone Shepherds, kept close tabs on his patrol. The 3 combat squads under his command had fell into a search formation pattern, moving carefully and confidently towards the communications outpost. The ground shook as Dreadnought brother Agnithio strode forward, keeping step with the patrol. The outpost lay before them, still quiet and not responding to repeat vox hails. According to battle briefing, it had stopped transmitting almost a month ago. When considered in combination with other anomalies in the sector, a troubling pattern was beginning to emerge. The Voxed hissed in his ear. "Movement," reported the Sergeant of Command Squad 3. "I've got a convoy of mining vehicles sitting to the north, 2 light runners and 1 truck." Cato acknowledged the message with a Vox click before broadcasting to the patrol. "Caution, brothers. Time to get some answers." Dars Zorbek halted her patrol just north of the compound, allowing the Ridge Runners to creep forward into a position that would give herself a little cover and them the opportunity to use their manoeuvrability to scout ahead if required. The Goliath truck waited nearby, cult members at each of its weapons scanning the compound ahead for movement. A squad of neophyte hybrids crouched in its open cargo area, checking that their repurposed weapons and basic autoguns were in working order. Meanwhile, Cato Paladris spread his 3 intercessor combat squads across the compound, hopefully giving a greater opportunity to outflank the enemy. He centered himself in the line, with brother Agnithio to the left, ready to open up with his heavy weapons should a suitable target present itself. There wasn't much cover, but Cato hoped that the high fences surrounding the compound and the comms bunker itself would block line of sight to the enemy, reducing the amount of incoming potential firepower. Regardless, he felt sure the power armour would be able to shrug off whatever was coming their way. Comfortable with his patrol's deployment, he opened a communication link with the mysterious mining convoy. "This is Lieutenant Cato Paladris of the Stone Shepherds, to unknown mining convoy. Please identify yourself." Dars ignored the hail. Instead, she signalled to her Ridge Runners. At her command, they rolled quietly into position. "I repeat, mining convoy. You must identify yourself now or we will open fire." With use of hand signals, Dars communicated that the Goliath truck should fall in behind her. She moved forward, taking up a position that put the Ridge Runners between herself and any incoming enemy fire. The Goliath rolled forward, its height giving the gunners on top a good vantage point to the approaching enemy. Satisfied that everyone was in position, Dars lifted her sniper and scanned for targets. She could just glimpse the top of the lumbering dreadnought over the fence. She marked it as a priority target for the patrol's heavy weapons before searching out something more suitable to receive her gift from beyond. A squad of Astartes were moving around the far end of the compound. Perfect. She sighted the target. Her radio crackled again. "This is your final warning," began the enemy lieutenant. Dars took a deep breath and fired. Her first shot passed clear through her target's chest piece. He stumbled but remained upright. Anyone other than an Astartes would have been instantly slain. Taking her lead, the rest of the patrol opened fire. The Goliath truck poured its weapons into the same squad that Dars had. Its heavy stubber rounds went wide or bounced off power armour, but its auto finished the job the sniper had started, slaying it with starters. At the same time, the Ridge Runner's weapons roared to life. The heavy stubbers firing against an intercessor, the shots bouncing harmlessly off armour. The mining lasers, though, found their mark, both slamming into the dreadnought, cutting through thick armoured plating, damaging vital systems. Cato had been halfway through another attempted Voxhail when the shooting started. The communications bunker blocked him from seeing what was happening, but he heard gunfire and multiple squads immediately reported contact. A moment later, his helmet auto-dimmed his optics as mining laser shots from the light vehicles burned into Brother Dreadnought Agnithio. Agnithio was hit, but still appeared functional. All squads, engage. We must shut down their heavy weapons. Move to close combat as soon as possible, he ordered as he ran forward. He placed his back against the bunker and risked a glance around the corner, seeing the enemy with his own eyes for the first time. To Cato's left, Brother Agnithio ambled forward, slightly slower than normal, having been damaged by the first salvo. From their flanking position, Squad 3 moved into the compound, raising their bolt rifles as they went. Combat Squad 2 couldn't get line of sight on the enemy, so instead broke into a swift run along the edge of the comms bunker, looking to add their firepower to their brothers as soon as they could. Squad 1 pushed towards a nearby signal tower, closing on the enemy, seeking to engage in close combat as soon as possible, bolt rifles ready to shoot as they moved. Brother Agnithio opened up with his considerable array of heavy weapons, fired everything at the Ridge Runners. His heavy onslaught Gatling cannon, spitting high impact rounds, smashed into the lead vehicle. His damaged systems were affecting his aim though, and the remainder of his shots went wide or bounced off the vehicle's armor. Squad 3 also opened up with their shots pinging harmlessly off its armor. The shots of Squad 1 also targeted the Ridge Runner, but also failed to leave a mark on the enemy. Having advanced to their current position, Squad 2 didn't have the time to shoot, while Cato himself was out of range with his pistol. Dars was surprised by the completely underwhelming retaliation from the enemy. Was this all the legendary Astartes could muster? The Imperium is weak. The Vox crackled in her ear as the crew of the Ridge Runners requested permission to retreat so as to maintain a safe distance to the closing intercessors, but Dars ordered her entire patrol maintain position. Pick your targets carefully. Mining lasers, finish that dreadnought. As she spoke, she fired a shot at an intercessor who had just appeared around the edge of the comms bunker, but that round plinked harmlessly off his shoulder. The Ridge Runners fired, the mining lasers finding their target again. There was a flash of light, and a moment later, the mechanized war machine stumbled, crumpling over with a crash, flames licking from the inside as vital systems were overloaded. It hadn't exploded, but it was completely disabled. The heavy stubbers were far less effective though. Aimed at the closest enemy, they failed to even scratch the armour of the intercessors. The thud of the Goliath truck's twin autocannon added to the din of battle as it opened up against the closest group of intercessors. One was hit and fell with a devastating salvo. The stubber though proved once again ineffective. The neophytes from the back of the truck fired blindly towards a group of intercessors, their shots causing no damage. One hybrid was lugging a mining laser, which it also fired at the approaching Astartes, but failed to do any damage. Cato staggered back as Brother Agnithio fell. He felt his righteous anger building. The scum would pay. At a glance, he summed up the state of the battlefield. The foolish enemy had remained in a position that would allow his combat squads to reach them, and even if they fell back, they would soon become trapped by the rocky terrain behind them. "Forward, brothers," he urged as he stepped out of cover and ran towards the enemy. "Look to engage in close combat. We must stop their heavy weapons. The combat squads needed no second bidding, rushing onwards towards the enemy, firing bolt rifles as they went. Combat Squad 3's shots thudded into the nearest ridge runner, the bolt rounds piercing its armour and exploding inside, almost, but not quite disabling it. Thick smoke poured out from vital systems. Seeing how badly damaged the ridge runner was, and knowing that their battle brothers would soon destroy it, Combat Squad 2 switched target and focused fire on the Goliath truck. They damaged it slightly, making the exposed crew duck for cover. Combat Squad 1 had closed on the stricken closest ridge runner, and as the fence was shielding any other targets from their sight, they held their fire. Instead, they readied close combat weapons as they began to charge. Combat Squad 2 was first to charge in. They closed rapidly on the ridge runners. Clearly the enemy had taken too long to fall back, and now the Stone Shepherds would be their end. As they charged, the enemy vehicles desperately fired one last salvo, heavy stabber shots going wide or bouncing off armour. The heavy mining lasers flashed as it tried to keep the attackers at bay. A lucky strike killed one intercessor instantly. Combat Squad 1 joined in the charge. Rounding the fence of the compound, they were on the nearest ridge runner in moments. Cato cursed his positioning. Still just too far away to reach the enemy with a charge, he bided his time, knowing soon they would feel the wrath of his power blade. Combat Squad 1 wasted no time in getting stuck in. However, the thick smoke from the nearby damaged ridge runner obscured their view, and although many of their hits landed, they failed to find weak spots in the vehicle's light armour. Combat Squad 2 though had no such trouble. Their attacks landed. One Marine punch cleared through a small viewport on the vehicle and dropped a grenade inside. The explosion muffled through the armour. The crew killed instantly. The rest of the squad focused on the other vehicle, causing what damage they could. The crew on the remaining ridge runner fought back, but their weak attacks failed to do anything at all to the enemy. Dars no longer needed to peer down the scope of her sniper rifle to see the Space Marines. They had closed the distance so quickly. With the cries of the crew from the besieged ridge runners sounding through the Vox, she knew it was time to retreat. "Fall back to position 2, she ordered, gunning the engine of her bike as she did so. A shower of gravel sprayed from her tyres as she swung it around. The Goliath reversed, making space for the remaining ridge runner to move into, which it did, shaking off the Space Marines that were attempting to surround it. Satisfied with the positions her patrol had now taken up, she allowed herself a grim smile. The Astartes were brave, but so foolish. She spoke into her Vox, giving a clear, coded command. "Colt ambush, now." An intercessor looked down in surprise as his Vox scanner started going wild. "We've got multiple enemies, close by, they're right here, in the ground, in the ground!" He pointed before opening fire with his bolt rifle. The rest of the unit joined in, as no more than a few short meters away, 5 Jackal bikers erupted from positions concealed under the ground, their demolition charges already lit. They had been lying in wait, and the Space Marines had walked right into the trap. Even with the warning of the Auspex scan, the ambush had surprised the Astartes, and most of their shots went wide, and those that hit failed to wound. Meanwhile, a sudden burst of movement in the corner of Cato's vision caused him to turn. A whirl of cloak and metal from around the fence line. A 3-armed Xenos had suddenly emerged, brandishing a pistol in each hand. Everything seemed to slow down for the Space Marines. They had walked into the most awful of traps. Perhaps they had been unlucky. Perhaps if Brother Agnithio still stood. Perhaps if they had been more cautious, things would have worked out differently. But now it was too late. Their fate was sealed. The freshly emerged Jackal bikers tossed their demolition charges. Some bounced towards Combat Squad 2, who disappeared in an explosion of fire and light. Other charges flew towards Combat Squad 1. The explosions tore through the intercessors. However, when the smoke cleared, 2 still stood. It wouldn't be for long. The rest of the Blackwater Gloomers opened fire. Dars, watching the carnage through the scope of her sniper rifle, targeted one of the still standing Astartes and shot, felling him. The other was taken out by the autocannons of the Goliath truck, the heavy stubber and shots from the neophyte squads peppering the ground around them. Xandus Razik, Calamorph of the Blackwater Gloomers, spun from his place of concealment. He had one target and one target only, the leader of these Astartes. Standing not 10 metres away, out in the open, Xandus fired, spinning gracefully with a whirl of motion, cloak and pistol. Cato looked on in horror. The beast was impossibly fast. 10 shots rung out. Cato knew he had been hit, his helmet screaming warnings of multiple breaches. It was too late though. He fell to the ground. It was over. As he lost consciousness, he felt nothing but anger and contempt for the enemy. Dars smiled. The ambush had gone better than she could have ever imagined. There was now just 4 remaining Marines, one little combat squad. It began to tactically withdraw, but they wouldn't get far. With a shout, she urged her patrol onwards to close around the enemy and make sure that none survived to report what had happened here.